I really appreciate the way you talk about democracy and justice, and how essential they are for one another. Um, what what insights would you provide to people who watched the events unfold over the last 6 years as they relate to threats to democracy, like the insurrection on January 6th? Like, what did that look like from your perspective with this career in threat assessment?
Well, I mean, seeing the rise of Trumpism and the MAGA movement was like watching the rise of, for lack of a better word, the Third Reich in America to me. There's a fantastic book that I would recommend anyone read, by Madeleine Albright on fascism. And as a threats analyst, the things that you look at in a society that make it vulnerable to authoritarianism at the first level, at level one, it's inequality. So when you're looking outward, now we're looking inward, but when I was looking outward at other nations as a threat analyst, what were the elements of a society that would lead it to a dictatorial or authoritarian regime? And number one is inequality. The higher the level of inequality, the greater likelihood of social upheaval that a demagogue could then leverage to gain power. And what happens in an inequality situation where a few people have a lot and most people have a little is that most of the people are afraid. They're afraid of tomorrow. They're afraid that they're not going to have enough money to feed their kids. They're afraid of what might happen to their house. They're afraid that they might lose this or that or everything. They might lose their livestock, their lands, whatever. But it's the inequality that breeds the fear. And then the demagogue comes in and capitalizes on the fear. The demagogue says, these problems are too big for you. I can solve them. I'm the strong man, right? And when Trump came along, that's what I saw. I saw America that had become more and more unequal over time. We have the wealthy getting wealthier and everyone else staying about the same. It's not like America was by in any way poor, but what was happening was the relative difference between the top and the bottom just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And in my opinion, as a threats analyst, we developed an oligarchic structure in the United States where you had powerful people with a massive amount of influence that began to corrupt the political system for personal gain. And then because of that, people sensed injustice, and you had voices of agitation out there spreading fear and anger and rage. And into that stepped Trump saying, let's make America great again. I'm going to give you guys all the stuff that you lost back. You can be afraid of those guys over there. They're running from climate change and other dictators. They're coming to take your work. They're coming to take your jobs. They're coming to take your good pay. I can change it. I can make it better. Only I can do it. How many times have we heard that before in history? Mussolini, Hitler, Pol Pot. You can just go on and on and on and on. So looking at that, yeah, it sent shivers down my spine. And at the same time, I looked at who Trump targeted. And who was it? It was white Southern grievance. It was, the people who had fear of others, people who had these, if you look a little different from me, he marginalized the minorities, the classes that were easy to victimize, the classes that were previously, easy to hate. I can't count the number of anti-Semitic messages that came out of, Trump surrogates and, sounded like Trump himself. The whole George Soros nonsense that's anti-Semitism right there. There's this guy he survived the Holocaust. And somehow he's like the puppeteer behind all the things that are bad for America. This guy who is a philanthropist and donates to like social justice causes. That's the demon, you know, and then later on they demonize Anthony Fauci or climate scientists and all this stuff. It's the erasure of knowledge in replacing it with rage. It's the march to tyranny all over again. And I know I'm kind of going on about it, but it scared the living daylights out of me. And I'm still afraid. And it makes me feel even more that I have an obligation to do something. And even if it's just in my family, you know, in the Preston family, then that's something. But you know, if the Prestons can become a crucible for trying to unwind that, then actually that would be an amazing thing. Because I'm not sure if that's ever happened